You're too old to have another baby, my sister Rachel mocked at Christmas dinner. So 3 weeks later, I announced something that made her face go completely white. Let me start with the moment that changed everything. Picture this: Christmas Eve, my childhood home in suburban Denver. Everyone gathered around the dining table that my mother had spent hours decorating with gold ribbon and white poinsettias. The turkey was perfectly golden, the cranberry sauce glistened in cut crystal bowls, and the conversation had just taken that familiar turn toward the one topic I dreaded most. But before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Sarah, and at 38 I was apparently past my expiration date for motherhood, according to my family. Not that anyone had asked me directly, mind you. They preferred to discuss my biological clock like I wasn't sitting right there, cutting my ham into smaller and smaller pieces while my stomach twisted into knots. It started innocently enough. My cousin Jamie had just announced her second pregnancy, and everyone was cooing over her barely there bump. She was 26, married to her college sweetheart, and lived in the kind of suburban paradise that looked like a stock photo. Everything about her life screamed perfect timing, in a way that made my own choices feel like cautionary tales. "Oh, Jamie, you're glowing," my mother gushed, reaching across the table to squeeze her hand. "2 under 2. How exciting. You're doing everything exactly right, sweetheart." That comment landed like a small blade between my ribs, but I kept chewing. I'd learned long ago that reacting to my mother's passive-aggressive observations only gave her more ammunition. Better to stay quiet, finish dinner, and drive back to my apartment where I could breathe again. But Rachel, my younger sister by 4 years, couldn't let a moment of peace exist if her life depended on it. "It's so smart that you started early," she said to Jamie, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Some people wait too long and then wonder why they have problems." Her eyes flicked to me meaningfully. "Sarah's still single at 38. Can you imagine trying to start a family now?" The table went quiet, except for the soft clink of silverware against china. I felt everyone's attention shift to me like a spotlight I never asked for. My father cleared his throat and reached for the wine bottle. My mother suddenly found her napkin fascinating. Jamie looked uncomfortable, probably realizing she'd walked into a minefield. But Rachel wasn't done. "I mean, the risks at that age," she continued, shaking her head with mock concern. "Down syndrome, miscarriage, fertility issues. And even if everything went perfectly, you'd be almost 60 at graduation. Can you imagine? All the other moms would think you were the grandmother." She laughed then, light and tinkling, like she'd just made the most clever observation instead of systematically destroying me at Christmas dinner. "Rachel," my mother said mildly, but it wasn't a real rebuke. More like the kind of token protest you make when someone says something you completely agree with but know you shouldn't voice yourself. "What? I'm just being realistic," Rachel said, spearing a piece of turkey with unnecessary force. "Sarah's had plenty of time to figure this out. Some of us just prioritize differently." The subtext was clear. Rachel had married her high school boyfriend at 22, had her first baby at 24, and her second at 27. She lived in a McMansion in the suburbs, with a white picket fence and a golden retriever named Buddy. She drove a minivan with family stick figures on the back window and volunteered at the PTA. By every conventional measure, she was winning at life, and she never let me forget it. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I wasn't single by accident. I'd been in a relationship with Marcus for 3 years. We lived together in a beautiful downtown loft, traveled together, shared dreams and inside jokes, and a life that felt full and meaningful. But Marcus was black, and I was white, and my family had made their feelings about interracial relationships crystal clear over the years, through 1,000 small comments and careful silences. So I'd kept him separate from them, compartmentalized my life in a way that felt increasingly suffocating, but seemed necessary for survival. They knew I dated, but they assumed my relationships never got serious because I was too picky or too focused on my career. It was easier to let them think I was a workaholic spinster than to deal with the alternative. Marcus understood, or at least he said he did. He'd grown up in a family that actually liked each other, where Sunday dinners involved laughter instead of psychological warfare. He couldn't quite comprehend the dynamics that made me choose hiding over confrontation, but he respected my need to handle my family my way. You know they love you, he'd said just that morning as I got dressed for Christmas Eve dinner. They just have a funny way of showing it. I'd kissed him goodbye and driven to my childhood home, wondering if love was supposed to feel like this. If family gatherings were supposed to leave you feeling smaller and more alone than when you arrived. Now sitting at that perfectly decorated table, while my sister casually eviscerated my life choices, I wondered what Marcus was doing. Probably making his grandmother's famous mac and cheese for his family's Christmas celebration, laughing at his uncle's terrible jokes, surrounded by people who saw his accomplishments instead of his failures. I was a successful marketing director at a tech startup. I owned my own apartment, traveled regularly, and had built a life I was proud of. But none of that mattered here. Here I was just the sad older sister who'd missed her window for real happiness. Sarah's career has always been her priority, my father said, attempting to steer the conversation somewhere less brutal. She's done very well for herself. It was meant to be supportive, but it landed like another tiny cut. The implication being that career success was my consolation prize for failing at what really mattered. That I'd chosen work because I couldn't get the husband and babies that would have made me truly worthwhile. Oh, absolutely, Rachel agreed, her smile sharp as broken glass. Sarah's always been so independent. It's just such a shame that independence comes with an expiration date, biologically speaking. I set down my fork carefully, took a slow sip of wine, and looked directly at her. And what makes you think I want children, Rachel? The question seemed to surprise her. She blinked a few times, then recovered with another laugh. Please, every woman wants children. Some just wait too long to admit it. Maybe some women have different priorities than you do. Or maybe some women tell themselves that because it's easier than admitting they made the wrong choices. The conversation continued around us, other family members jumping in with their own observations about biological clocks and perfect timing and the tragedy of career women who wake up too late. But I stopped listening. Instead, I was thinking about something that had happened 2 weeks earlier. Marcus and I had been grocery shopping, something so mundane and domestic that it shouldn't have been noteworthy. But we'd run into his coworker's wife in the produce section, and she'd been juggling a screaming toddler while trying to pick out apples. The kid was having a complete meltdown, throwing himself backward in the cart, while his mother tried to calm him down. Most people would have hurried past, embarrassed by the public display of parental struggle, but Marcus had walked right over. "Hey there, buddy," he'd said to the little boy in that voice adults use with upset children. "Apples are pretty boring, huh? I bet you'd rather be at the playground." The kid had stopped mid-scream, surprised by this stranger who was talking to him like a person instead of a problem to be solved. Marcus had made funny faces until the boy giggled, then helped the grateful mother load her cart, while keeping up a steady stream of silly conversation. Watching him, I'd felt something shift in my chest. Not baby fever exactly, but a recognition of something I hadn't even realized I wanted. Not the Instagram perfect version of motherhood that my family valorized, but the messy real thing. The partnership of raising someone together, teaching them to be kind and funny and brave. Later that night, I'd brought it up casually while we were making dinner. "Do you ever think about kids?" I'd asked, trying to sound nonchalant while I chopped onions. Marcus had paused in the middle of stirring pasta sauce. "Yeah, sometimes." "Do you?" "Sometimes." We'd looked at each other across the kitchen, both of us recognizing that this was one of those conversations that could change everything. But before we could dive deeper, his phone had rung with a work emergency, and the moment had passed. Now, sitting at my family's Christmas table while they discussed my reproductive failures, like I was a tragic medical case study, I found myself thinking about that moment. About Marcus's easy way with children, about the life we'd built together, about all the possibilities we'd never really talked through. "Earth to Sarah," Rachel's voice cut through my thoughts. "Mom asked if you're seeing anyone." I looked up to find all eyes on me again. My mother was wearing that particular expression of strained hope she got whenever the topic of my dating life came up, like maybe this time I'd finally have good news to share. "I'm focusing on other things right now," I said, which was my standard non-answer. "Other things," Rachel repeated with a smirk. "Right, well, just remember that focusing on other things doesn't stop your eggs from aging. Biology doesn't care about your 5-year plan." That was it. That was the moment something inside me snapped. Not visibly, nothing dramatic. I didn't throw my wine or storm out, or deliver a devastating comeback. I just sat there, nodding politely while my sister continued her lecture on reproductive timelines, and made a decision that would change everything. I was going to tell them about Marcus. Not today, not in the middle of Rachel's performance, but soon. I was going to stop hiding the most important relationship in my life, because my family couldn't handle the idea of me dating someone who didn't look like them. More than that, I was going to figure out what Marcus and I actually wanted for our future. The conversation we'd started and never finished was going to happen, and I was going to stop letting other people's opinions dictate the shape of my life. But first, I was going to finish this dinner, smile through Rachel's continued commentary on my biological inadequacy, and drive home to the man who actually loved me, instead of the version of me they wished I could be. The rest of Christmas Eve passed in a blur of forced conversation and careful politeness. We opened presents. I got a spa gift certificate and a self-help book about finding love after 35, because apparently my family's subtlety knew no bounds, and made small talk about work and weather, and anything that wasn't my disappointing reproductive status. Rachel, emboldened by the wine and what she clearly saw as a successful evening of putting me in my place, kept making little comments. About how nice it must be to sleep in on weekends, how much travel I'd be able to do while I was still childless, how important it was for women to be realistic about their limitations. Each comment was delivered with a smile, and wrapped in fake concern, the kind of emotional terrorism that families specialize in. The kind that leaves you questioning whether you're being overly sensitive, or if you're actually under attack. By the time I hugged everyone goodbye and walked to my car, I felt wrung out and raw. The December air was sharp against my face, and I sat in the driver's seat for a long moment before starting the engine, just breathing in the silence. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. How did it go? Still have all your limbs? I typed back, barely. Heading home now. I'll warm up some leftovers. My grandma made enough food for a small army. The simple kindness of it, the assumption that I'd want to share his family's leftovers, instead of wallowing alone in my apartment, made my throat tight. This was what love looked like when it wasn't wrapped in conditions and expectations and constant judgment. The drive back to downtown took 40 minutes, long enough for me to replay the evening's conversation and feel my anger crystallize into something sharper and more focused. Rachel thought she knew everything about my life, about my choices, about what I wanted and didn't want. She'd appointed herself the expert on my biological limitations and my romantic failures, holding court at Christmas dinner, like she was delivering some kind of public service announcement. What she didn't know was that while she was building her perfect suburban life with her high school sweetheart, I was building something else entirely. Something that didn't fit into her narrow definition of success, but felt more real and meaningful than anything I'd ever experienced. Marcus was waiting when I got home, curled up on our couch with a book and a glass of wine. He looked up when I walked in, and I could see him taking inventory of my face, reading the tension in my shoulders. "That bad?" he asked. I kicked off my heels and collapsed next to him. Rachel spent the entire evening explaining why I'm too old to have children and too pathetic to find a husband. He closed his book and pulled me closer. The annual Sarah intervention, something like that. I buried my face in his shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent of his cologne, mixed with whatever his grandmother had cooked. She kept going on about biological clocks and missed opportunities, and how sad it is that career women don't prioritize what really matters. "And what did you say?" "Nothing, I just sat there and took it like I always do." Marcus was quiet for a moment, his hand running through my hair in that way that always calmed me down. Finally he said, "You know you don't have to keep protecting them from the truth about your life, right?" I pulled back to look at him. "What do you mean?" "I mean maybe it's time they knew that you're not actually the tragic spinster they think you are. Maybe it's time they knew you're in love with someone who loves you back, and you're building a life that makes you happy." The words hung in the air between us, loaded with everything we'd been avoiding for 3 years. The conversation about why I kept him separate from my family, about what that separation cost both of us, about where we saw this relationship going. "It's complicated," I said, which was true but also felt like a cop-out. "It doesn't have to be." I wanted to argue with him, to explain about family dynamics and the path of least resistance and all the reasons why keeping things compartmentalized was easier for everyone. But sitting there in our living room, still wearing the dress I'd put on to impress people, who seemed determined to find fault with me no matter what I did, those reasons felt increasingly flimsy. What if we talked about kids? I said instead, surprising both of us. I mean, really talked about it. What we want, what that would look like for us. Marcus went very still. Are you asking because you want to know, or because your sister got in your head? Both maybe. I laughed, but it came out shaky. I've been thinking about it more lately. Whether we want that together, whether I want it at all, or if I just think I should want it. And I think I do want it. Not the way Rachel has it, not the suburban cookie-cutter thing, but something, a family with you. The words felt terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. I'd never said them out loud before, never let myself want something that felt so far outside my family's approval or understanding. Marcus was quiet for so long that I started to worry I'd misread everything, that he'd been content with our child-free life, and I'd just blown everything up with my post-family dinner emotional spiral. Finally, he said, I want that too. I have for a while actually. Relief flooded through me so fast it made me dizzy. Really? Really, I love our life, but I think I'd love adding to it even more. Teaching someone to ride a bike, reading bedtime stories, watching you be an amazing mom. Your family would be okay with it. With me? He looked confused. My family loves you. They've been asking when you're going to make an honest man out of me since our 6-month anniversary.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
Right, because in Marcus's family, love was straightforward. No conditions, no judgment, no elaborate tests you had to pass to earn acceptance. They'd welcomed me from day one, asked about my work, remembered my birthday, included me in their group texts about holiday plans. The contrast with my own family was so stark it was almost funny. Almost. What about your family? Marcus asked gently. How do you think they'd handle it? I thought about Rachel's performance at dinner, about my mother's careful silences, about my father's well-meaning but conditional support. I thought about all the times I'd sat at that dining room table feeling like a disappointment, like a cautionary tale, like someone who'd fundamentally misunderstood the assignment of being a woman in this family. I think I said slowly, that it's time I stopped caring what they think. Marcus smiled, the kind of smile that transformed his whole face. Yeah, I'm 38 years old. I have a career I love, a relationship that makes me happy, and if I want to have a baby with the man I'm in love with, that's nobody's business but ours. The man you're in love with. I realized what I'd just said, and felt my cheeks heat up. We'd been dancing around those words for months, both of us knowing but neither of us quite ready to make it official. Did I not mention that part before? I asked, trying for casual and probably failing. I think I would have remembered. Well then let me be clear. I turned to face him fully, taking his hands in mine. I'm in love with you, Marcus. I have been for a long time. I want to build a life with you, and I want to stop hiding that life from people who are supposed to care about my happiness. He kissed me then, soft and sweet and full of promise. When we broke apart, he rested his forehead against mine. I love you too, he said. And I think we should start trying, for a baby, for a real conversation with your family about who you actually are, and what you actually want. For all of it, I felt something settle in my chest, a peace I hadn't experienced in years. This was what it felt like to be truly known and loved, not for who others wanted me to be, but for exactly who I was. There's something else, I said, struck by a sudden idea. I know how I want to tell them. Tell them what? Everything. About you, about us, about what we want. I want to do it right, in a way that makes it impossible for them to twist or minimize or dismiss. Marcus raised an eyebrow. What are you thinking? I grinned, feeling more like myself than I had in months. I'm thinking about New Year's Eve. My parents always have that big party. All the extended family comes. Rachel loves being the center of attention, showing off her perfect life and her perfect kids. And this year, I'm going to show up with the most important announcement of my life. I'm going to tell them about you, about us, about the fact that we're trying for a baby. I'm going to make it impossible for them to keep pretending I'm the sad spinster sister who can't get her life together." Marcus looked concerned. "Are you sure? That sounds like it could get ugly fast." "Maybe. But I'm tired of letting them control the narrative about my life. I'm tired of hiding the best thing that's ever happened to me because they might not approve. If they can't handle the truth about who I am and what makes me happy, that's their problem, not mine." We talked for hours that night, making plans, and talking through possibilities, and imagining what our life might look like with a child in it. Marcus told me about the room in our apartment that would make the perfect nursery, how we could convert his office and he could work from the dining room table for a while. I told him about the children's books I'd been secretly buying for months, hidden away in the back of my closet like guilty secrets. By the time we went to bed, I felt lighter than I had in years. Not because the situation with my family would be easy, but because I'd finally decided to stop making myself smaller to accommodate their limitations. Rachel thought she knew everything about my life, about my choices, about my biological limitations. She'd spent Christmas Eve educating me about the realities of being an aging spinster, secure in her position as the successful sister who'd done everything right. What she didn't know was that while she was busy feeling superior, I was falling more in love every day with a man who saw me as I actually was. A man who wanted to build a family with me, not despite my age, but because of everything I'd become, by living my life on my own terms. New Year's Eve was exactly 1 week away. 7 days to prepare for the conversation that would change everything, to get ready to step out of the shadows and claim my space in my own family. I fell asleep that night, with Marcus's arm around me, and a plan forming in my mind. Rachel had spent Christmas dinner explaining why I was too old and too alone to have the life I really wanted. I couldn't wait to prove her wrong. The next morning, I woke up with the kind of clarity that only comes after making a decision that terrifies and excites you in equal measure. Marcus was already up, making coffee in the kitchen, and when he saw me he smiled like he could read the determination on my face. "Still feeling good about the plan?" he asked, handing me a mug. "Terrified but good," I admitted. "I keep thinking about all the ways this could go wrong. And all the ways it could go right." I nodded, taking a sip of coffee and letting the warmth ground me. I've been living in their version of my story for so long, I almost forgot I could write my own. That week flew by in a blur of preparation and nervous energy. Marcus and I had the conversation we'd been avoiding for months, the real one about timelines and hopes and what we wanted our family to look like. We talked about names we loved, about the kind of parents we wanted to be, about how we'd handle the inevitable challenges of raising a child in a world that wasn't always kind to families like ours. We also talked about my family's likely reaction, trying to prepare for every possible scenario. Marcus was optimistic in the way that people who come from functional families tend to be. He believed that once they saw how happy I was, how solid our relationship was, they'd come around. I wasn't so sure, but I was done letting their potential disapproval dictate my choices. On Wednesday, 3 days before New Year's Eve, I called my mother to confirm I'd be at the party. "Of course, dear," she said, sounding pleased. "I was hoping you'd come. Rachel's bringing the kids, and Jamie will be there with her husband. It'll be nice to have the whole family together. Actually, I wanted to ask if I could bring someone." There was a pause. Oh, a date. "My boyfriend. We've been together for 3 years. Another pause, longer this time. 3 years. "Honey, why haven't you mentioned him before?" "Because I knew you'd find something wrong with him," I thought but didn't say. Instead I went with, "We've been taking things slow, but I think it's time you met him." "Well, of course, what's his name?" Marcus Johnson." "And what does he do?" I could hear the assessment beginning, the mental checklist my mother always ran through when evaluating the men in our lives. Job, family background, earning potential, general suitability for producing grandchildren. "He's a software engineer, very smart, very kind. I think you'll like him." "I'm sure we will, dear. It'll be so nice to finally meet him." But I could hear the questions in her voice, the curiosity about why I'd kept this relationship secret for so long. She'd probably spend the next 3 days speculating with my father about what was wrong with him, what red flags had kept me from bringing him around sooner. Let her wonder. Soon enough she'd have all the answers she could handle. Thursday and Friday passed in a haze of last-minute planning. I went shopping for a dress that would photograph well, something elegant but not too formal, something that said successful woman in love, rather than desperate spinster trying too hard. Marcus picked out a shirt that brought out his eyes and made jokes about meeting the parents while looking slightly nervous around the edges. "What if they hate me?" he asked, Friday night as we were getting ready for bed. "Then that's their loss," I said, meaning it. "But they won't hate you. They might be surprised, they might need time to adjust, but they won't hate you. And if they do," I thought about it seriously, "then we'll know where we stand, and we'll build our family with the people who actually support us." He nodded, but I could see the worry still creasing his forehead. Marcus had never experienced conditional love, never had to wonder if the people closest to him would still be there if he made choices they didn't approve of. The idea that my family might reject him simply for existing was foreign to him in a way that made me both envious and protective. Saturday morning arrived gray and cold, with snow threatening in the heavy clouds that hung over the city. I spent longer than usual getting ready, changing outfits 3 times before settling on a deep blue dress that Marcus said made me look confident and beautiful. He wore charcoal slacks and a white button-down that somehow managed to make him look both professional and approachable. "Ready?" he asked, as we stood in front of the mirror by our front door. "No," I said, "but let's do it anyway." The drive to my parents' house took an hour in holiday traffic, plenty of time for my nerves to ratchet up to uncomfortable levels. Marcus kept up a steady stream of conversation, telling me stories about his own family's New Year's traditions, making me laugh, despite the anxiety twisting in my stomach. "Worst case scenario," he said, as we pulled into my parents' neighborhood, "we stay for an hour, make polite conversation and leave. Best case scenario, your family surprises you." "What's medium case scenario?" "Medium case is they're weird about it, but ultimately come around because they love you and want you to be happy." I squeezed his hand. "I'm hoping for medium case." My parents' house was already full when we arrived, cars lining the circular driveway and spilling onto the street. Through the front windows, I could see people milling around with drinks, the warm glow of the party in full swing. For a moment I considered turning around and driving home. It would be so much easier to keep living the lie, to maintain the status quo, and avoid the inevitable awkwardness of this conversation. But then I thought about Rachel's voice from Christmas Eve, the casual cruelty of her comments about my biological limitations and romantic failures. I thought about all the years I'd spent feeling like a disappointment, like someone who'd fundamentally misunderstood what it meant to be successful and happy. "Let's go crash this party," I said. Marcus grinned and kissed my cheek. "That's my girl." We walked up the front steps together, and I could feel him straightening his shoulders, preparing to meet the family who'd been such a mystery to him for 3 years. I rang the doorbell instead of walking in, wanting this moment to feel official, intentional. My mother answered, wearing a silver cocktail dress and her best hostess smile. The smile faltered slightly when she saw Marcus behind me, but she recovered quickly. "Sarah, you look beautiful, honey." She hugged me, then turned expectantly to Marcus. "Mom, this is Marcus." "Marcus, my mother, Patricia." Marcus stepped forward with his hand extended and his warmest smile. "Mrs. Williams, it's so nice to finally meet you. Sarah talks about you all the time." My mother shook his hand, and I watched her taking inventory. His appearance, his manner of speaking, the expensive watch on his wrist, the way he looked at me with obvious affection. I could practically see the gears turning as she tried to reconcile this polite, attractive man with whatever she'd been imagining. "Please, call me Patricia," she said. "Come in, both of you. Everyone's in the living room." We followed her through the foyer, past the family photos that chronicled years of holidays and graduations and achievements. There I was at my college graduation, at my first job, at various family gatherings, always slightly apart from the group, always looking like I was trying too hard to belong. The living room was packed with relatives I saw once or twice a year, all dressed in their New Year's Eve finest, and working their way through my father's famously strong cocktails. Conversations paused as we entered, that subtle shift that happens when something unexpected walks into a familiar space. My father spotted us first, and made his way over, his face carefully neutral. "Sarah, good to see you, sweetheart." He hugged me, then turned to Marcus with the assessing look I knew well. "Dad, this is Marcus." "Marcus, my father Robert." "Sir, it's an honor to meet you," Marcus said, offering his hand. "Thank you for including me tonight." My father shook his hand firmly, the kind of handshake test that men of his generation used to take measure of other men. Whatever he found seemed to satisfy him, because his expression softened slightly. "Any friend of Sarah's," he said, "can I get you both a drink?" We followed him to the bar he'd set up in the corner, and I could feel eyes tracking our movement across the room. Conversations resumed, but I caught fragments of whispered speculation, family members trying to figure out who this man was and why they'd never heard of him before. Rachel appeared at my elbow before I'd finished ordering my wine, her smile bright and predatory. "Well, well," she said, "look who finally brought a date to a family function. Rachel, this is Marcus." "Marcus, my sister Rachel, the famous Rachel," Marcus said with a smile that seemed genuine. "Sarah's told me so much about you." I wondered what he thought he knew about Rachel based on my carefully edited stories. I'd tried to be fair when I talked about my family, focusing on the good memories and downplaying the more toxic dynamics. Looking at them together now, I realized how impossible it would be for him to understand the full scope of what I was dealing with. "All good things, I hope," Rachel said, but her eyes were sharp as she looked between us. "I have to say, Sarah's been very mysterious about her love life. We were starting to worry she'd given up on finding someone." "Just waiting for the right person," I said evenly. "And how long have you two been dating?" Rachel asked Marcus directly.
3 years, he answered, and I watched Rachel's eyebrows climb toward her hairline. 3 years? Sarah, why didn't you tell us? That's practically a marriage at your age. There it was, the casual dig wrapped in fake concern. At my age, as if 38 was ancient, as if I should be grateful that anyone was willing to date me at all. "We've been taking our time," I said, "making sure we're compatible." "Compatible," Rachel repeated with a little laugh. "How modern, and what do you do, Marcus?" He answered her questions with patience and charm, telling her about his work, his background, his interests. I watched Rachel's expression change, as she realized that Marcus wasn't some desperate last resort, wasn't someone I'd settled for because my options had run out. He was successful, articulate, clearly devoted to me, and completely different from what she'd expected. Other family members drifted over as the evening progressed, drawn by curiosity and the novelty of meeting Sarah's mysterious boyfriend. Marcus handled it all with grace, answering the same questions over and over, laughing at my uncle's terrible jokes, complimenting my aunt's dress, fitting seamlessly into the family dynamic in a way that looked effortless, but I knew required real skill. Jamie found us by the appetizer table, her pregnancy now impossible to hide under her flowing dress. "Sarah, you look amazing," she said, hugging me warmly, "and you must be Marcus." "I'm Jamie, Sarah's cousin, the one with the exciting news," Marcus said with a smile. "Congratulations. When are you due?" "June," Jamie said, her hand moving automatically to her bump. "We're so excited. It's going to be such a busy summer with 2 little ones." "I bet. Do you know what you're having?" "Another girl. We're thinking about names, but it's so hard to decide." I listened to them chat about babies and names and nursery themes, watching Marcus engage with genuine interest and warmth. He asked thoughtful questions, shared funny stories about his nephew, made Jamie laugh with his impressions of sleep-deprived parents. This was the Marcus my family was finally meeting, not the mysterious figure they'd built up in their minds, but the real man who brought me coffee in bed every morning, who remembered my friends' birthdays, who made me laugh until my sides hurt and held me when I cried.
As the evening wore on, I could see their opinions shifting. My mother kept glancing over at us with an expression I couldn't quite read, something between surprise and recalculation. My father engaged Marcus in a conversation about sports that lasted 20 minutes, nodding approvingly at his takes on the upcoming playoffs. Even Rachel seemed temporarily thrown off her game, unable to find the obvious flaw she'd been looking for. Marcus was too successful to dismiss, too charming to dislike, too clearly devoted to me to write off as temporary, but I knew this was just the opening act. The real test would come when I made my announcement, when I told them not just that I had a boyfriend, but what we were planning to do together. Around 10 o'clock, as the party was hitting its peak, and people were starting to talk about midnight toasts and New Year's resolutions, I caught Marcus's eye across the room. He was talking to my cousin David about something technical, but when he saw me looking, he excused himself and made his way over. "How are you feeling?" he asked quietly. "Nervous, but ready. You don't have to do this tonight if you're not sure." "I'm sure, I just need to find the right moment." That moment came about 20 minutes later, when my father tapped his glass and asked for everyone's attention. The room quieted as people turned toward him, drinks in hand, faces flushed with alcohol and conversation. "Before we get too much closer to midnight," he said, "I wanted to take a moment to say how grateful Patricia and I are to have all of you here tonight. Family is everything, and looking around this room, I'm reminded of how lucky we are to have such wonderful people in our lives." There were murmurs of agreement, people raising their glasses in acknowledgement. Rachel beamed from across the room, clearly expecting this to turn into a celebration of her recent accomplishments or her children's latest achievements. "I also wanted to acknowledge that we have someone new with us tonight," my father continued, nodding toward Marcus. "Marcus, welcome to the family circus. I hope Sarah warned you what you were getting into." Everyone laughed, and Marcus raised his glass with a smile. "She did, and I'm honored to be here." "And Sarah," my father said, his voice getting softer, "it's wonderful to see you so happy, sweetheart. You're glowing tonight." This was it. This was the opening I'd been waiting for. I could feel my heart hammering against my ribs as I stepped forward slightly, Marcus moving to stand beside me. "Actually, Dad, there's something I wanted to share with everyone." While we're all together, the room went quiet again, but this time it felt different. Expectant, I could see Rachel straightening, her antenna tuned for whatever drama was about to unfold. I took a deep breath and reached for Marcus's hand. He squeezed my fingers, and I drew strength from the contact. "As Dad mentioned, Marcus and I haven't been properly introduced to the family until tonight. But the truth is, we've been together for 3 years. 3 wonderful, amazing years, during which I've fallen completely in love with this incredible man." I paused, letting that sink in. I could see confusion on several faces, surprise on others. Rachel looked like she was trying to solve a puzzle with missing pieces. "I know some of you might be wondering why I kept our relationship private for so long," I continued. "And the truth is, I was scared that you might not understand, that you might not approve, that bringing Marcus into our family might create complications. I wasn't ready to handle." My mother's face had gone very still. My father was frowning slightly, not in disapproval, but in the way he did when he was trying to understand something that didn't quite make sense to him. "But I realized recently that I've been doing all of us a disservice by keeping this part of my life separate. You deserve to know who I really am, what makes me happy, what my life actually looks like. And Marcus deserves to be acknowledged as the most important person in my world." Marcus squeezed my hand again, and I could feel his love and support flowing through that simple contact. "So I wanted to tell you tonight, in front of everyone I care about, that Marcus and I are planning to get married." The room exploded into surprised congratulations and excited chatter. People came forward to hug us, to shake Marcus's hand, to express their happiness and surprise. But I wasn't done yet. I raised my hand for quiet, and the room settled again. "There's something else," I said, and I could feel the anticipation ratchet up another notch. "Marcus and I have also decided that we want to start a family together. We're trying for a baby." This time the silence was complete. I could have heard a pin drop in that room, as 30 people processed what I'd just told them. Rachel's face had gone completely white. My mother looked like she'd been struck by lightning. My father was staring at me with an expression I couldn't read at all. I know some of you might have concerns about my age, I continued, looking directly at Rachel, about whether it's wise to try to have children at 38. But Marcus and I have talked extensively with my doctor, and she's very optimistic about our chances. And more importantly, we're ready, we're financially stable, we're deeply in love, and we're excited about the possibility of adding to our family. Jamie was the first to break the silence, stepping forward with tears in her eyes. Sarah, that's wonderful, she said, pulling me into a hug. I'm so happy for you both. Her enthusiasm seemed to break the spell, and suddenly everyone was talking at once. Congratulations, questions, excited speculation about wedding plans and baby names and timing. But I kept my eyes on Rachel, watching as she struggled to process this complete upending of the narrative she'd constructed about my life. Just a week ago, she'd been lecturing me about my biological limitations, explaining why my single status at 38 was such a tragedy. Now here I was, engaged to a man she'd never met, planning a family she'd never imagined, glowing with happiness instead of wilting with despair.
Nope.
My mother finally made her way through the crowd to reach me, her face a mixture of joy and bewilderment. Honey, she said, this is such wonderful news. Why didn't you tell us sooner? 3 years is a long time to keep something like this secret. I looked at her carefully, trying to decide how honest to be. I wasn't sure how you'd react. I wanted to be sure about us before I brought him home. But darling, we would have been nothing but supportive. We just want you to be happy. Would you have been, I wondered. Would you have been supportive if I'd brought Marcus home 3 years ago, before you'd had a chance to see how successful and charming he was? Would you have been supportive if you'd known from the beginning that he was black, that our children wouldn't look like the grandchildren you'd imagined? But those were questions for another day. Tonight was about celebration, about finally stepping into the light with the life I'd built in secret. I know, Mom, I said instead. I'm sorry I waited so long. She hugged me tight, and I could feel her genuine happiness mixing with her confusion. A wedding and a baby, she murmured. Oh, Sarah, this is so exciting. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of congratulations and questions. Everyone wanted to know about our timeline, our plans, how we'd met, when we'd known we were serious. Marcus handled it all, with his usual grace, charming my relatives and winning over anyone who might have had initial reservations. Rachel stayed on the other side of the room for most of the night, making polite conversation but avoiding direct contact with Marcus and me. I could see her struggling with this new reality, trying to reconcile the successful happy couple we obviously were with the tragic narrative she'd been spinning about my life. Around 11:30, she finally cornered me by the bathroom, her face tight with something between anger and confusion. So she said, without preamble, how long have you been planning this little performance? I'm sorry, the mysterious boyfriend, the surprise engagement, the baby announcement, it's all very convenient, don't you think? I stared at her. Convenient for what? For making me look like an idiot. For proving some kind of point about Christmas dinner. Rachel, this isn't about you, isn't it? You keep this guy secret for 3 years, then suddenly decide to debut him, right after I comment on your dating life. You don't think that's suspicious? I felt something cold settle in my stomach. You think I made this up? You think I hired Marcus to pretend to be my boyfriend? I think you're very upset about what I said at Christmas, and this is your way of getting back at me. The absolute certainty in her voice, the complete inability to believe that I might actually have built a happy life without her knowledge or approval, left me speechless for a moment. Rachel, I said finally, I understand that this might be surprising, but 3 years, Sarah. 3 years you've been lying to us about having a boyfriend. What else have you been lying about? I haven't been lying, I just haven't been sharing everything. Same thing, no it's not. I'm allowed to have privacy. I'm allowed to build a relationship without submitting it for family approval. We're your family, we're supposed to be part of your life. You are part of my life, but you're not the only part. She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her processing this idea, that I might have a whole existence outside of her understanding or control.
Fine, she said finally, but don't expect me to pretend this isn't weird. Don't expect me to act like it's normal to hide someone for 3 years, and then spring them on the family at a party. I'm not asking you to pretend anything, I'm just asking you to be happy for me. Are you happy, really, or are you just trying to prove some kind of point? The question hit me like a slap. After everything I'd just shared, after the obvious joy on Marcus's face, and the clear strength of our relationship, she was still questioning whether my happiness was real. I'm the happiest I've ever been in my life, I said quietly. I'm sorry that's hard for you to believe. She looked at me for another long moment, then shook her head. I hope that's true, I really do, but I also hope you know what you're doing. She walked away before I could respond, leaving me standing in the hallway with my heart pounding and my hands shaking slightly. I'd expected resistance, but I hadn't expected her to question the fundamental reality of my relationship. Marcus found me a few minutes later, reading my face with the accuracy that came from 3 years of loving attention. Everything okay? Rachel thinks I'm lying about us. She thinks I hired you to make her look bad. His eyebrows shot up. She thinks you hired me. She thinks this whole thing is some elaborate revenge plot for Christmas dinner. Marcus was quiet for a moment, processing this. That says more about her than it does about you. Does it though? Maybe she's right. Maybe I did choose tonight to make a point. So what if you did? Making a point doesn't make your feelings any less real. It doesn't make our relationship fake, or our plans less valid. He was right, of course. The timing might have been motivated by Rachel's comments, but the substance was entirely real. Marcus was real, our love was real, our plans for a future together were real. Come on, he said, taking my hand, let's go count down to midnight, with people who are actually happy for us.
We rejoined the party just as people were gathering for the countdown. My parents were beaming, still processing the news but clearly thrilled. Jamie was asking Marcus about his family, excited about the prospect of our children being close in age. My uncle was making jokes about how I'd managed to keep such a big secret for so long. As the countdown began, Marcus pulled me close and whispered in my ear, "Any regrets?" I looked around the room at my family, some celebrating with us, others still processing, all of them finally seeing me as I really was instead of who they'd assumed me to be. "None," I whispered back. 10, 9, 8. The room counted down together, voices rising with excitement and champagne-fueled enthusiasm. 7, 6, 5. Marcus's arms tightened around me, and I could feel his heart beating against my chest. 4, 3, 2. I thought about Rachel's shocked face, about my mother's tears of joy, about the life Marcus and I were building together. 1. Happy New Year. Marcus kissed me as midnight struck, and I kissed him back with all the love and hope and determination I'd been carrying for 3 years. Around us, the room erupted in celebration, but for that moment, it was just us, just this perfect beginning to what I knew would be an extraordinary year. When we broke apart, I looked into his eyes and saw my whole future reflected there. Not the future my family had imagined for me, not the tragic spinster narrative Rachel had been so fond of, but something entirely our own. "Happy New Year, future Mrs. Johnson," he murmured. "Happy New Year," I said back. "Let's go make some babies." He laughed, and I laughed, and somewhere across the room, Rachel was probably still trying to figure out how the script had gotten flipped so completely, but that was her problem now, not mine. 6 weeks later, I was staring at 2 pink lines on a pregnancy test in my bathroom at 7 in the morning, while Marcus brushed his teeth, completely oblivious to the fact that our entire world had just shifted. My hands were shaking as I set the test on the counter, then picked it up again to make sure I was reading it correctly. 2 lines meant pregnant. I knew this because I'd taken 4 tests in the last 3 days, each one showing the same result, each one making my heart race a little faster. "Marcus," I said, my voice coming out as barely a whisper. He mumbled through a mouthful of toothpaste. "Can you come here for a second?" He rinsed and turned around, taking one look at my face and immediately going alert. "What's wrong? Are you okay?" I held up the test without saying anything, watching as his eyes focused on the 2 pink lines, then widened as understanding hit him. Is that, he started. Positive. They've all been positive. All. I've taken 4 tests. This is number 4. Marcus reached for the test with reverent hands, staring at it like it might disappear if he looked away. We're having a baby. We're having a baby. He set the test down carefully and pulled me into his arms, spinning me around our tiny bathroom while I laughed and cried at the same time. When he set me down, we were both grinning like idiots. When do you think it happened? He asked. Well, we've been trying for 6 weeks, so probably sometime in the last 6 weeks. Very scientific of you. I have an appointment with Dr. Martinez next week. She'll be able to give us a better timeline. Marcus kissed my forehead, then my nose, then my lips. I can't believe it. We're actually going to be parents. The reality of it hit me in waves over the next few days. I was pregnant. At 38, after Rachel had spent Christmas dinner explaining why this was essentially impossible, I was actually pregnant with the baby Marcus and I had dreamed about. We decided to wait until after the doctor's appointment to tell anyone, wanting to make sure everything was progressing normally before we shared the news. Those few days felt like carrying around the most wonderful secret in the world, catching each other's eyes across the dinner table, and smiling for no apparent reason. Dr. Martinez confirmed what the tests had told us. I was 6 weeks pregnant, due date in early September, everything looking perfect. She scheduled me for monthly appointments and gave us a stack of pamphlets about prenatal care and what to expect. Any concerns about my age? I asked, remembering Rachel's dire warnings about geriatric pregnancies. None at all, Dr. Martinez said firmly. You're healthy, you're active, you take care of yourself. Plenty of women have healthy pregnancies at 38. We'll monitor you a little more closely than we might a younger patient, but that's just standard precaution. Marcus squeezed my hand as we walked to the car, both of us still processing the surreal reality of seeing our baby on the ultrasound screen. Just a tiny blob at this point, but unmistakably there, unmistakably ours. So when do we tell people? He asked, as we drove home. Your family first, I said. They'll be thrilled. And yours? I thought about that question for a long moment. My family's reaction to our New Year's announcement had been mixed. My parents had warmed up to Marcus quickly, charmed by his obvious love for me and his easy manner with them. But Rachel had remained skeptical, questioning everything from our timeline to our motives. We'll tell them at Sunday dinner this weekend, I decided. All together like we did with the engagement. You sure you're ready for that? I'm sure I'm tired of managing their opinions about my life choices. We called Marcus's parents that evening, putting them on speakerphone so we could both share the news. We have something to tell you, Marcus said, barely containing his excitement. You eloped, his mother said immediately. I knew it, you couldn't wait for a big wedding. We didn't elope, Mom. You bought a house. Mom, just let us tell you. We're pregnant, I said, unable to wait any longer. The silence on the other end lasted exactly 2 seconds before Marcus's mother started screaming with joy. Then his father was whooping, and his sister was demanding details, and suddenly everyone was talking at once. How far along? His mother asked, when the chaos died down. 6 weeks, due in September. Oh my God, a September baby, that's perfect timing. Not too hot, not too cold for bringing the baby home. Have you told your family yet? His father asked. This weekend, I said. You're the first to know. We're so happy for you both, his mother said, and I could hear the tears in her voice. This baby is going to be so loved. After we hung up, Marcus and I sat on our couch, holding hands and grinning at each other like teenagers who'd just been asked to prom. That went well, he said. Your family is easy. Mine will be more complicated. They'll come around. How can they not be excited about becoming grandparents? I hoped he was right, but I'd learned not to underestimate my family's ability to find problems with my house. Sunday dinner at my parents' house had been a monthly tradition for as long as I could remember. Rachel usually brought her kids. Jamie and her husband often joined us, and we'd spend a few hours catching up over my mother's famous pot roast and discussing everything from work to politics to neighborhood gossip. This Sunday felt different from the moment we walked in. My mother was unusually attentive to me, asking if I wanted anything to drink, if I was comfortable, if I needed an extra pillow. Rachel watched these interactions with narrowed eyes, clearly sensing something was up. "You're being weird, Mom," she said finally. "Why are you hovering over Sarah like she's made of glass?" "I'm not hovering. I'm being a good hostess. Since when do you ask guests if they need pillows?" Marcus caught my eye from across the room and raised his eyebrows slightly. We'd planned to wait until after dinner to make our announcement, but Rachel's suspicion was making that difficult. "Actually," I said, deciding to change course, "there's something Marcus and I wanted to share with everyone." The room went quiet in that way, that had become familiar since New Year's Eve. Rachel immediately straightened, her antenna up for whatever bombshell I was about to drop. "We have some news," Marcus said, moving to stand beside me. "Good news, I hope," my father said with a smile. I took a deep breath and looked around the room at my family. "We're pregnant." For a moment nobody moved. Then my mother let out a small gasp and pressed her hands to her mouth. My father's face broke into a huge grin. Jamie squealed and clapped her hands together, and Rachel went very, very still. "Pregnant," she repeated, her voice completely flat. 6 weeks, I said. "Due in September." My mother recovered first, jumping up to hug both Marcus and me with tears streaming down her face. "Oh honey, this is wonderful. A baby. I can't believe it." My father was close behind, shaking Marcus's hand and pulling me into a bear hug that lifted me off my feet. "Congratulations, sweetheart. This is fantastic news." Jamie was asking a million questions about due dates and symptoms, and whether we had any names picked out. The room filled with excited chatter and congratulations and speculation about whether it would be a boy or a girl. But through it all, Rachel remained silent, sitting in her chair with the expression I couldn't quite read. Not angry, exactly, but not happy either. Something harder and more complicated than simple surprise. "Rachel," my mother said finally, noticing her silence, "isn't this exciting? Sarah's having a baby." "Yes," Rachel said carefully. "It's very exciting," but her tone suggested it was anything but exciting to her. Dinner proceeded with the usual family chaos, but now with an undercurrent of baby talk. My mother was already planning shopping trips for nursery furniture. My father was making jokes about being called grandpa. Jamie was excitedly talking about how close our babies would be in age. Rachel participated in the conversation when directly addressed, but I could feel her watching me throughout the meal with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. When I excused myself to use the bathroom after dinner, she followed me. "So," she said, as soon as the bathroom door closed behind us, "Pregnant?" "Yes, pregnant." "Is there something you want to say about it?" "Just that the timing is interesting." "What do you mean?" "I mean 6 weeks ago you announced that you were trying for a baby, and now you're pregnant. That's pretty convenient." I stared at her. "Convenient how?" "Well, you made this big announcement at New Year's about wanting to start a family, and now suddenly you're pregnant. It's like you planned the whole thing." "Rachel, that's literally how getting pregnant works. You try, and if you're lucky, it happens. Some people try for months, years even, but you announce it publicly, and then boom, pregnant, 6 weeks later. That's either incredibly lucky, or incredibly suspicious." The implication hit me like a slap. "Are you suggesting I was already pregnant at New Year's?" "I'm not suggesting anything. I'm just saying the timeline is convenient." "For what? What possible reason would I have to lie about when I got pregnant? To make your announcement more dramatic? To prove a point about what I said at Christmas?" I felt something cold and angry settle in my chest. "Rachel, I am not lying about my pregnancy timeline. I am not using my unborn child as a prop in some elaborate revenge fantasy against you."
Aren't you, though? Everything about this feels like performance art. The secret boyfriend, the surprise engagement, the immediate pregnancy, it's all very neat and tidy. Or maybe, just maybe, I actually have a life that doesn't revolve around your opinions. She laughed, but it wasn't a pleasant sound. "Right, because it's totally normal to hide a relationship for 3 years and then suddenly decide to share everything at once. I shared it when I was ready to share it. You shared it when you wanted to make a point." We stared at each other across the small bathroom, years of tension and resentment crackling between us. I realized this wasn't really about my pregnancy,
or my relationship timeline. This was about Rachel's complete inability to accept that I might be happy without her approval or understanding. "You know what?" I said finally. "You're right, I did want to make a point. The point being that your opinion of my life doesn't actually matter. The point being that I can build a beautiful relationship and plan a family without asking for your permission or your input. And you think that makes you better than me? I think that makes me an adult." Rachel's face flushed red. "You think you're so smart, don't you? You think you've figured everything out. But you have no idea what you're getting into. With pregnancy, with motherhood, I think I have a pretty good idea. With having a baby at 38, with raising a mixed-race child in this family, with thinking you can just waltz in here and rewrite the narrative about who you are." The words hung in the air between us, ugly and raw and more honest than Rachel had been in years. So there it was, finally out in the open. Not just her skepticism about my timeline or my choices, but her real issue with Marcus, with our baby, with the future we were building together. "There it is," I said quietly. "Your real problem." "I don't have a problem. I'm just being realistic about the challenges you're going to face." "No, you're being racist. And you're mad because my happiness doesn't fit into the box you built for me." "I am not racist. I like Marcus just fine. I'm just saying that raising mixed children comes with complications you might not have considered." "Complications like what?" "Having a family that doesn't fully accept them." Rachel's mouth opened and closed a few times, but no words came out. I could see her realizing that she'd revealed more than she intended, that she'd crossed a line she couldn't uncross. "I think this conversation is over," I said, reaching for the door handle. "Sarah, wait. I didn't mean yes you did. You meant exactly what you said." I opened the door and walked out, leaving her standing alone in the bathroom with the weight of her own words. Marcus was waiting in the hallway, clearly having heard enough to understand what had happened. "Ready to go?" he asked quietly. "More than ready." We made our excuses to my parents, thanking them for dinner and promising to call soon with more details about the baby. My mother hugged me extra tight at the door, whispering how excited she was to be a grandmother. "Don't let Rachel get to you," she said softly. "She's just processing. She'll come around." I nodded and smiled, but I wasn't sure I believed it. Some things couldn't be walked back once they were said. The drive home was quiet, both of us lost in our own thoughts. Finally Marcus said, "How much of that did you hear?" "Enough. She's worried about us having a mixed-race baby. And what do you think about that?" I thought about it seriously. I think our child will be lucky to have parents who love each other and will teach them to be proud of who they are. I think if some members of our family have a problem with that, it says more about them than it does about us. Marcus reached over and took my hand. "I love you. I love you too, and I love this baby already, no matter what color it is or who has opinions about it, even if it means dealing with difficult family dynamics. Especially then, our baby deserves better than to be hidden or apologized for or treated as a problem to be solved." We spent the rest of the evening on our couch, making plans and talking about the future and ignoring the texts that kept coming from my mother asking if everything was okay. Eventually, I turned my phone off altogether. This was our beginning, Marcus and me and the tiny life growing inside me. We'd build our family with love and intention and pride, surrounded by people who celebrated us instead of tolerating us. And if that meant leaving some people behind, well, that was a price I was finally ready to pay. 3 weeks later, Rachel sent a long text apologizing for her comments and asking if we could talk. I read it twice, then deleted it without responding. Some bridges, once burned, aren't meant to be rebuilt. Some families, once broken, reveal that they were never as whole as they appeared. But some new families, built on choice and love and mutual respect, turn out to be stronger than anything that came before. At my 12-week appointment, Dr. Martinez showed us a much clearer ultrasound image. Our baby was growing perfectly, measuring exactly where it should be, looking more human and less like a tiny alien. "Everything looks wonderful," she said. "You can start sharing the news more widely if you want." Marcus and I looked at each other and smiled. We'd already shared it with everyone who mattered. The rest of the world could catch up when they were ready. But this baby, our baby, was already surrounded by more love than it could possibly need. 7 months later, I was holding our daughter in the hospital bed while Marcus dozed in the chair beside me, exhausted from 18 hours of labor coaching. She was perfect, with Marcus's dark eyes and what looked like it might be my stubborn chin. Her tiny fingers wrapped around mine like she'd been waiting her whole life to meet us. The door opened quietly, and my mother peeked in with a bouquet of pink roses and tears already streaming down her face. "Oh my goodness," she whispered, stepping closer to the bed. "She's beautiful, Sarah. Absolutely beautiful. Mom, meet your granddaughter. This is Emma." My mother's face crumpled as she reached out to touch Emma's tiny hand. "Hello, sweet Emma. I'm your grandma, and I love you so much already." My father appeared behind her, looking emotional in that way men of his generation tried to hide. "How are you feeling, sweetheart?" "Tired but amazing." She came 3 days early, apparently couldn't wait to make her entrance. "Just like her mother," he said with a smile. "Always impatient." Over the next few hours, a steady stream of visitors filled our room. Marcus's parents arrived with enough balloons to float the hospital, his sister brought homemade cookies, and Jamie stopped by with flowers and stories about how her own daughter had been asking when her new cousin would arrive. Everyone wanted to hold Emma, to marvel at her tiny features, to comment on who she looked like, and how alert she seemed for such a new baby. She was passed from loving arms to loving arms, already surrounded by family who saw her as nothing but a miracle. Rachel didn't come. She'd sent a card to the hospital with a generic congratulations message and her signature, nothing more. No phone call, no visit, no acknowledgement of the niece who'd arrived healthy and perfect, despite all her dire predictions about late-in-life pregnancies. "Has she seen the photos?" Marcus asked quietly, while Emma slept in his arms. I'd posted a single picture on social media, Emma's tiny hand curled around my finger, announcing her arrival with her stats and a simple caption about being overwhelmed with love. "She liked the post," I said. "But that's it. I'm sorry. Don't be. This is her choice, her loss. Emma will grow up knowing she's loved by the people who matter." And she was loved fiercely and completely. At 3 months she was rolling over and smiling at anyone who talked to her. At 6 months, she was sitting up and reaching for everything within her grasp. At 9 months, she was crawling around our apartment like she owned the place, babbling constantly and making everyone laugh with her determination to explore every corner of her world. My mother was besotted, visiting weekly with new toys and clothes, taking hundreds of photos, and sharing stories about Emma's latest achievements with anyone who would listen. My father had turned into the kind of grandfather who carried pictures in his wallet and bragged about his granddaughter's obvious genius to strangers in grocery stores. Emma was everything I'd hoped for, and nothing like the complications Rachel had predicted. She was curious and joyful, reaching equally for Marcus's dark skin and my pale hands, secure in her place in our family. She charmed everyone she met with her bright smile and easy laugh, a child who clearly felt loved and wanted from her very first breath. On Emma's first birthday, we threw a party in our apartment with both sides of the family represented. Marcus's parents brought their famous mac and cheese. My mother made her special birthday cake, and Emma sat in her high chair, wearing a frilly pink dress, and getting frosting absolutely everywhere. Rachel's invitation had gone unanswered. "She's walking now?" Marcus's mother asked, watching Emma cruise around the coffee table with impressive determination. "Just started this week," I said proudly. "Any day now she'll let go and take off on her own. Independent little thing, isn't she?" "Wonder where she gets that," Marcus said with a grin, kissing my cheek. As the evening wound down and guests started leaving, my mother pulled me aside in the kitchen. "I need to tell you something," she said quietly. "Rachel asked me to give this to you." She handed me a small wrapped box with a card attached. My name was written on the envelope in Rachel's careful handwriting. She wanted to come today, but she wasn't sure she'd be welcome. I looked at the box, then at my mother's hopeful face. What does she want? To apologize? To meet her niece? To try to fix what's broken between you? I thought about the past year, about all the milestones Rachel had missed, all the moments she'd chosen to stay away rather than confront her own prejudices, about the conversations we'd never had, and the relationship we'd probably never repair. "Maybe someday," I said, setting the box aside unopened. "But not today." My mother looked disappointed but didn't push. "She's sorry, Sarah, really sorry." "I know, but sorry doesn't erase what she said. And it doesn't guarantee she won't say it again." Later that night, After everyone had gone home and Emma was asleep in her crib, I sat on our couch with Marcus and opened Rachel's gift. Inside was a silver baby bracelet engraved with Emma's name and birth date, and a letter that I read once and then folded back up. What did it say? Marcus asked. That she was wrong, that she's sorry, that she wants to be part of Emma's life, and I'm not ready. Maybe I never will be. Marcus nodded, understanding without judgment.
That's okay.
Emma has plenty of people who love her exactly as she is. He was right. Our daughter was growing up surrounded by love and acceptance, with grandparents who spoiled her rotten and extended family who celebrated every milestone. She was confident and happy, secure in her place in our world. At 18 months, Emma took her first independent steps across our living room, straight into my waiting arms. At 2, she was stringing words together, and had developed an impressive vocabulary that she used to narrate everything she did. At 3, she started preschool and made friends instantly, her natural warmth and curiosity drawing other children to her like a magnet. She was everything Rachel had said would be complicated, and she was thriving. Sometimes I wondered what would have happened if I'd listened to the voices that said I was too old, too single, too set in my ways to start a family. If I'd accepted Rachel's narrative about my limitations and given up on the possibility of this life. But sitting in our living room on a random Tuesday evening, watching Emma and Marcus build elaborate block towers, while dinner cooked in the kitchen, I couldn't imagine any other path. This was my family, loud and messy and perfect, built on love and choice, and the decision to stop letting other people define what my happiness should look like. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Emma's picture from the park today is adorable. She looks so much like you did at that age. Then another one. Rachel saw it. She asked if she could call you sometime. I looked at the messages for a long moment, then deleted them both without responding. Some chapters of your life close for good reasons, and some families are the ones you build rather than the ones you're born into. Emma toddled over with a block in each hand, babbling something that sounded like a very important announcement about her architectural plans. I scooped her up and kissed her cheek, breathing in that sweet baby smell that never got old. What do you think, little one? Ready for dinner? She clapped her hands and said something that was definitely yes, even if it didn't sound quite right yet. Marcus appeared in the doorway, apron around his waist, and a wooden spoon in his hand. Ladies, dinner is served. This was my family. This was my choice. This was the life I'd built when I stopped caring what anyone else thought about my timeline, my decisions, my happiness. And it was perfect. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.